Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thank you for being here. Democrats do not care about the people coming across the border. There is without a doubt a crisis at the border. Hold on, I know there's a lot of people watching. They're like, whoa, that's offensive to me as a Hear me out, all right? Give me a minute. There is without a doubt a crisis at the border, and it's completely unnecessary. And don't be fooled. Democrats don't care about the children. Last week, it was the Dallas Convention Center. Just yesterday, where I live in San Diego, the San Diego Convention Center, after a year of housing homeless people because of COVID, all the homeless are being cleared out to make way for 1,500 illegal immigrant children between the ages of 13 and 17 who came across alone and have no family. And they're going to be housed at a place that looks like this, over 1,000. This is a footage from inside one of the new welcome centers along the border right now. These are one of the leaked photos. The Biden administration refuses to have any media actually go inside and take any pictures, so this was a leaked photo. All Trump's fault. There are so many people coming across the border now. The head of the Department of Homeland Security said more than the last 20 years. There's so many people. We're not even giving them court dates on when to appear for their trial. Check out this from NBC News. It says, amid surge, border agents in Rio Grande Valley were authorized Saturday to begin releasing adult migrants and family from custody before they've been given a date to appear in court, according to an internal document obtained by NBC News. So here's how this works. This is important to visualize. So there's three separate policies here. Before Trump, we'll call this policy number 2. Before Trump, an illegal immigrant makes it across America. The Border Patrol acts like a glorified Walmart welcome crew. The immigrant runs to the Border Patrol, says, here I am, here I am. They say what they need to say in order to get, free to go. They get a court date assigned to them, and then Border Patrol drops them off at whatever, the bus station, and then go wherever they want. And they may or may not ever show up back in court again, right? So they're captured at the border and given a court date, released into America. Okay? That's option 2. Trump came in and said, enough of that nonsense. So he enacted 2 policies in particular. The first, if you're seeking asylum, so if you live in a dangerous country and you got to get out of there for your life and you're seeking asylum, then you have to stay or you have to go to the first safe country you get to. Right? So if you're in Brazil and you need to seek asylum from Brazil, you don't just go country shopping and pick whatever country you want to go to and then have a right to go to that country just because you want to. You go to the first country where you're safe. Then if you want to apply to come into America from there, then that's fine. But asylum goes to the first safe country you can get to. That's one policy that Trump enacted. It's called the third country policy or something like that. The second thing that Trump did is if you apply to come into America legally, you have to wait in Mexico. So you see the difference? So that's policy number 1, right? Does that make sense? So see the difference? Policy number 2 is, yeah, you come on in, and then as we're going through your paperwork, you can just go anywhere you want in America. Come on back if you want to your court date, right? Trump said, no. While we're looking at your paperwork and everything, you're waiting in Mexico. Cool? To me, that policy makes perfect sense. Now, Biden came in and enacted now a third policy. This is you come across illegally, and we're so overwhelmed, we don't even give you a court date. We don't even give you a notice to appear. You're just free to go anywhere you want in America. Congratulations. Isn't that amazing? That's policy number 3. See the difference? So which of those 3 do you prefer? Policy 1 is Trump's. You wait on the other side of the border. Policy number 2 will give you a court date. You're free to go. Policy number 3, Biden's policy, which is nothing, just whatever. Within 2 months, Biden has completely eliminated the border. Right? I mean, there's no border if this is the case, which now it is. Here's Trump on Fox News yesterday.
You have murderers, you have sex traffickers, you have a lot of very bad people coming into our country, and they're doing nothing about it. They're going to be released, or they're already being released. Yesterday they announced that they're just going to let them go into the country. No courts, no nothing. It's crazy. They're destroying our country. I must say, I never thought that Biden And it's not Biden; it's other people that are, putting stuff in front of him.
You don't think it's him?
But I never thought that Biden in a million years would be worse. Nobody did. Would be far worse than Bernie Sanders. This is Bernie Sanders on steroids. This is what he's doing.
I saw this headline first, and I wasn't going to play this, but then I realized it was ABC News that was reporting this. And I got to give a little bit of credit to the mainstream news for starting to cover this story here. So here's ABC News.
This father, who asked that we not show his face, traveled to Mexico from Brazil with his wife and 3 young kids before crossing the border. Would you have tried to do this when Donald Trump was president?
Definitely not. Definitely. We had the chance, the same violence that is going on today was there last year. We used to watch the news, and I definitely won't do this.
So did you come here because Joe Biden was elected president?
Basically. The main thing was the violence in my country. And the second thing, I think, was Joe Biden.
And Martha Raddatz is shocked. So, wait, you came here because Joe Biden was elected? Yeah, lady. We're like, what do you, of course. Because again, Trump had 2 policies. It's worth going over these again. First, you apply to come into America, and while we go through your application, you wait in Mexico. The beginning of that clip there, right before that, she talks about how these border towns that have been set up are now empty because all the people who were in them have now come across the border. Second thing Trump did, if you're seeking asylum, you got to go to the first country where you're safe. You don't go country shopping. Those are 2 completely sensible policies. You get rid of them, and this is what you have. That's why it's completely unnecessary. This didn't happen over the last 40 years. We got the Washington Post reporting on what's going on in our border facilities. 100 kids in a room, mattresses just inches from another, over 200 Border Patrol agents diverted to care for children. And here's the point I want to make today. There's a million points we can make on this, and we're going to make them all eventually. This is the point I want to make today. You think the Democrats care? Do you think they really care? I mean, by Democrats, I mean Democrats in power. Biden, Kamala, in California, the Democrats in California, Newsom and the rest. Do you think they really care? Did you, back in 2017 when they were talking about kids in cages, did you think they really cared about those kids? You thought they really cared about those people? AOC, you thought when she went to that border, here she's crying. You thought she's crying at the border. You thought that was real? You thought they were how sad. You thought they were legitimately outraged when they called them concentration camps at the border and kids in cages? Okay, that's fine. That's fine if you got tricked back then. It's easy to get swept up in something. Have you learned your lesson? Have you learned your lesson? Are you going to fall for it again? Democrat from Connecticut, Chris Murphy, senator, he said, yeah, this is not kids in cages. Notice, by the way, we showed the pictures of the leaked pictures from inside the center. They're not bars anymore, and they're not like a chain link fence. It's now like plastic walls, like clear plastic walls. I guess that looks better. The optics are better. So Chris Murphy is like, yeah, these aren't kids in cages, but this is not anywhere where you would want your child to be for more than 10 minutes. And that's part of the problem, and that's the point I want to make today. When immigrants come to America, it doesn't affect the elites at all. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, he will be affected precisely 0 by a flood of illegal immigrants coming to America. He actually may be helped. He can hire some Guatemalans to do some yard work, maybe raise his kids for him. Who else is going to pick up Gavin Newsom's kids from school? Right? They've been going to school since September, so in person. Someone's got to pick them up. He'll benefit, if anything, from these illegal immigrants coming in. Who's going to get hurt the most by a flood of illegal immigrants? Low-wage workers? How about people who go to lower-income schools that are now flooded by people who don't even speak English? Gavin Newsom's kids, they're at a private school. There's no Hondurans in that private school. People on the left, they have this utopian, idealist vision of the immigrants who come to America, right? They've created a movie in their head about what they think it looks like, right? So to them, it's a very vague picture, but it's someone who works really hard and they just want to come to America, and they just want to raise a family and make a life for themselves, and that's what they do, right? And they stop the story there. What they don't see is the mother of 3 kids, who the cartel then takes 2 of them away from her so that they can give those 2 kids to other strangers so that these other strangers also get preferential treatment when they come across the border. And then when they do get across using these kids as a prop, they dump the 16-year-old into sex slavery in Houston. Don't hear that story. Do you? Do you hear that story a lot? Do you hear about the sex trade? Do you hear about prostitution, sex slavery going on with the drug cartels? Oh, you trust the drug cartel. That's the other thing. Other people are like, no, Slater, that doesn't happen. Oh, that's too low for the drug cartels. Slater, I just don't see the drug cartels getting in the sex trade business with underage girls. Really, you don't see that. The left doesn't think about stuff like that when they're so moved by their compassion to help their fellow man, when they themselves are not actually affected at all. Hold on, wait, the guys in New York are telling me we have pictures of AOC visiting. We have pictures of AOC visiting the detention center. There she is, looking sad as well. Funny, I don't see that this go around. It's different. She cared so much 3 years ago. Not so much anymore. But they get to project to the world still when they call for open borders how wonderful and enlightened and kind and compassionate they are by letting Guatemalans move into America. Not near them, of course. I don't want any Guatemalans near me. But we're going to let them move into the poorer parts of America, and they'll be fine there. And aren't I wonderful? This is entirely a Joe Biden Democrat-caused disaster. It is entirely unnecessary, and the drug cartels love it. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, we got 2 great guests coming up. So in the next segment, we're going to talk to someone who's running for Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. And think, well, why is that important? A couple of years ago, the Democrats in Pennsylvania said, it's an elected position, we need to take over the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. We're just going to take it over. And they have. They've completely taken it over. I think there's 5 justices, and they're all far-left activist Democrats. And that's why you had so much of the election fraud going on, where they could just change the law out of the state Supreme Court, because they're just a bunch of political activists. So we have someone who's running against one of those justices to get in there, which is wonderful. So we'll talk about her coming up, and then we'll talk about transgender. Boys wanting to compete in girls' sports. You saw what the governor of South Dakota did the other day. She kind of bailed out on an effort to prevent this from happening. So we'll talk about that coming up in the last segment. But first, COVID is over. And I know we did a segment on this yesterday. I want to keep repeating this so that we can all start to celebrate this and start acting like it. This is wonderful news. COVID is over, but not so fast. CDC says there's going to be a 4th wave of COVID. Is there? What's the true story? So our Professor Vincent Racaniello, who's the professor of virology at Columbia University, he's with us every single Monday. He's said now for over a month that there's not going to be a 4th wave. This is Scott Gottlieb. He's the former head of the FDA. He's been very on COVID, right? This whole time he's been, wear masks. We need to shut down for periods of time. Like he's all on this. And now he's like, oh yeah, no. Well, here's what he said. He was asked about a 4th wave.
Well, I don't think we're going to have a fourth wave. I think what we're seeing around the country is parts of the country that are plateauing, and we're seeing upticks in certain parts of the country. I think the fact that we have so much prior infection, 120 million Americans have been infected with this virus, the fact that we've now vaccinated, we've gotten one shot in at least 70 million Americans, even if you account for the fact that maybe about 30% of the people being vaccinated previously had COVID, we're talking about some form of protective immunity in about 55% of the population. So there's enough of a backstop here that I don't think you're going to see a fourth surge.
Yeah, that's it. No fourth wave. He went on to say that he thinks we're at about, what did he say, 55%, right? And our professor, our virologist, Professor back in Yale, has been saying the same thing, that we're above 50% right now, and that's all you need. That's it. Yet, there's still going to be a pretty small group of people. Again, I'm here in California, so people are more freaking out than maybe other parts of the country, but there's still going to be a group of people who are going to be these holdouts who, unfortunately, because we live in such a litigious society, are going to dictate how we should be allowed to behave moving forward, right? We're going to have a small group of people, whether it's 5, 10%, who are going to dictate to everybody what we need to do and what we can't do and what we can do. I went to a park the other day with the kids. There was a family there, masked up, when we got there. And we arrived at just the same time as another family, and they were all masked up. They had 2 little kids, maybe a 3-year-old girl and a 6-year-old girl, something like that. And we all went to go play in the playground, and they were all very standoffish. And I went within a couple feet of their youngest daughter at one point, and the woman, the mom, she runs over, grabs the daughter, and says, "Kids, let's take a break." And just, not to me, right? Just passive aggressively. "Some people aren't wearing their masks." And they went over to the side. I said, "Ma'am, are you really leaving the playground because we're not wearing masks?" And she said, "It's against the law to not wear a mask." I said, "It's March 2021. We're outside. It's windy. You're fine." Now, I share this story not only because clearly I am a modern day Rosa Parks. I mean, I'm a hero. Me, Nelson Mandela, Rosa Parks, we're all in the same breath, the same maskless breath. I bring this up because a couple months ago, I'd play your game, right? A couple months ago, I'd be thoughtful, considerate of your fears. It would be under this umbrella of we need to be compassionate to your fellow man. Oh, it's only a small thing that I can do to help others. It's a common courtesy. It's not a big deal. Months ago, I'd be in that. Those days are over, lady. That's it. That ship sailed. I'm being serious. A couple months ago, I would have moved playgrounds to accommodate the people who wanted to be there and be extra precautious. I would have gotten there and be like, oh, they're kind of freaking out about stuff. Okay, fair. Let's go. Kids, we'll go play over here, right? Not make a big deal about it. No, not anymore. If you want to live in delusional fear, you got to go to a different playground. We're not playing your game anymore. Does that make sense? And it's not that my patience has run out, although yeah, the situation's changed. It's different now than it was a couple months ago. That's my point. It's different, and we should be celebrating this. Things are different. We know more. I'm not sick. We're outside. What's your fear exactly? What are you afraid of? I don't get it. I was telling this to a friend last night. He said he pulled up next to someone in the car who was in the car wearing 2 masks. What do you think's gonna happen? And I would say this to the lady, what do you think's gonna happen? I'm on the other side of the playground. You think a virus particle is going to leave my mouth, float merrily in the wind, over the slide and through the monkey bars and land on your precious little nose and make you sick? Is that what you think's gonna happen? So because of that totally irrational fear, I can't go to the playground with my kids? No way. You're so scared you find a time when no one else is at the playground. The days of me accommodating you are over. So again, I bring this up not because I'm a hero. I should note, I don't make a fuss about masks in stores. In California, we still have to wear masks in stores. I don't make a fuss because the employees are just, like the poor girl working outside the grocery store who's telling you to put your mask on. Like, it's not her rule. Right? She's just making minimum wage. She's like a high schooler. Like, what am I gonna right? But a playground's a very different scenario. I bring all this up because masks on kids has to stop. That's gotta stop. Right? We were the only people in the park in San Diego, the only people in the park not masked. There was a dad with his 2 middle school-aged kids walk into the basketball court. They were masked up. They were by themselves. It was the dad and his 2 kids were masked in the park. And then I looked over later, they were playing basketball by themselves with masks. There was a family having a picnic up on this little hill here, masked up. Guys, what are you doing? You gotta reevaluate. What are you going to do? Are you going to wear a mask forever? I mean that honestly. At what point do you say, hey, great news, kids, we don't have to wear a mask anymore. Great news, kids, we don't have to be scared of everybody you get within 6 feet of from this point forward. At what point will you say that? Or are you just going to wear masks forever now? Because why not? Maybe we should stop all flu deaths too. It's just a little thing that you can do. It's common courtesy, you know? We're at that point. We're at the point. But again, sorry, I got off topic. My biggest concern is the psychological harm of masking up your kids. The fear that you're instilling in your kids, the fear of other people, right? To the point where this 3-year-old can't play near another person because he doesn't have his mask on. We're raising kids to think of other people as walking pathogens, as walking diseases that are ready to infect you unless everyone's wearing their magical mask. We've gone a year now, over a year, with kids not seeing other people's faces and smiles. One of the tests for autism is they show kids pictures of people's faces, and the kids have to be able to read their faces and understand their emotions that the person is trying to give based off their facial expressions. We have kids who have a whole year, and I don't know what age emotional intelligence grows the most, but whatever age that is, those kids have gone a year without being able to read other people's faces and smiles. We've gone a year instilling fear in our kids and teaching them very, very unfortunate lessons. It's not common courtesy anymore. It's not. You're feeding into a paranoid delusion that's causing way more harm than good, especially in kids, and it needs to stop. The psychological trauma, I'm not exaggerating, the trauma of dropping your kid off at a school where the teachers are there in full hazmat suits, right? Like have fun at school, honey. like what are we doing? Here's the problem, and this is true with this and many other things. Once something becomes political, it's over, right? In our society today, once something becomes political, then it becomes tribal. And once something becomes tribal, then we act primal. And once we act primal, we stop using our brains. So many people are not going to ever stop wearing masks. Why? Because Trump didn't wear a mask. The no mask is a Trump position. Okay? So it's political. Masks are political. Because it's political, now it's tribal. Okay, well, I'm in the tribe that always wears masks because we're compassionate and we save lives. So we wear masks, kids. It's the nice thing to do to your fellow man, right? So it's tribe, that's your tribe. They'll never reevaluate, because if they stopped wearing masks, they would leave their tribe, and now they're doing something that Trump does. So they're gonna stay in their tribe forever and wear a mask and never reassess their actions based off changing conditions, because they'll never wanna do something that Trump did. Once something becomes political, it becomes tribal, we become primal, and we stop using our brains. Just to reiterate this point about how COVID's over, we're at a point now in America where we have too many vaccines. Think about this. Months ago, we were like, I don't know if we'll ever come up with a vaccine. We may never have a vaccine for this, ever. And now we have too many. We got a list here of how many vaccines are out there. There's 3 currently, and then we have the AstraZeneca, which is waiting, and then we have another one coming in the wings as well. So we have 5 vaccines, all right? There are so many vaccines in America, the rest of the world doesn't have any. So we have this AstraZeneca vaccine. You saw the New York Times story here. We have this AstraZeneca vaccine that's sitting in a freezer in Ohio. I'm not kidding. And we're just about to finish up our American trials of this. And as soon as we're approved, then they're going to go out there as well and flood America. But there's an argument made that we don't even need it. We don't need that vaccine. So we should give them to other countries. There's so many vaccines in America, people are going to be tripping over needles. So New York Times wrote this whole article about how we have so many, we should give the AstraZeneca vaccines to other countries that don't have any. But listen to that sentence before we debate whether or not we should actually do that. Too many vaccines? We have too many? Pfizer and Moderna say they're going to have 400 million by the end of May, 600 million by the end of July. That's every single American. We also have another 100 million doses ordered of Novavax. That's the 5th vaccine that's going to be coming. So we have too many vaccines. That's great. It's wonderful. Let's celebrate that. COVID is over. Stop instilling the fear in your kids, especially. All right, coming up next, we'll talk about the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court, which has national implications now when you have state Supreme Courts, especially Pennsylvania, who can have so much control over national elections. We'll talk about that coming up next. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. In this segment, we're going to talk about the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. Now, that seems super random if you're in any other state other than Pennsylvania, but we now know the national implications of the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court when it comes to our federal elections. So we better get this court right by the time 2024 rolls around so that we don't have more activist judges on the Pennsylvania court that can change the entire election for the entire country. I want to talk about what the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court did, but they changed election law. But this case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. We didn't get a chance to talk about this on the TV show. It went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court denied hearing it. They said, before the election, they said, there's no standing. So the election hasn't taken place and no one's been harmed, so there's no standing. And then after the election, the Supreme Court said, it's moot, it's over. So you can't sue before, you can't sue after. What do we do, right? Clarence Thomas, he wrote in the dissent, he said we should have heard this case. He says, one wonders what the court waits for. We failed to settle this dispute before the election and provide clear rules. Now again, we fail to provide clear rules for future elections. The decision to leave election law hidden beneath a shroud of doubt is baffling. By doing nothing, we invite further confusion and erosion of voter confidence. Our fellow citizens deserve better and expect more of us. I respectfully dissent. Someone running for Pennsylvania State Supreme Court, it's an elected position. Judge Paula Patrick is here. Judge Patrick, how are you today?
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really, really glad you're here, and thank you for running. Let's go back. Take us to Pennsylvania. And when did activists decide to take over the state Supreme Court?
Well, I think it initially started back in 2015 when we had an election, a very expensive judicial election at that year for the Supreme Court, where we had 3 open seats, and the liberals, the Democrats, had taken all 3 seats. Since then, we have seen the court go very heavy, leaning to the left, and I believe at this point they've become a fully partisan body, and they've ceased and desist to be a true court of law, which is why I'm running for the Supreme Court.
5 justices, is that right? And we don't have to go through. There's 7. Okay, how many of them? What's the political makeup? I know it's nonpartisan, but what's the political makeup?
It is a partisan court. We have 5 Democrats and we have 2 Republicans, and one of the Republicans is actually stepping down due to age. The mandatory retirement age in Pennsylvania is 75 years old for a judge. So the judge has to leave by the end of the year, therefore creating the vacancy going forward. So
that's the seat you're running for?
That's the seat I'm running for, correct.
Okay, let's go to the specifics of what they did. How do you assess what the state Supreme Court did with this election?
Well, I can't really talk much about that, just in the event something else comes. So I can say this, Justice Clarence Thomas was absolutely right. I think that I've been now 18 years on our Court of Common Pleas here in Philadelphia, which is a trial court division. And listen, it's important that we have a hearing to assess the situation. In this particular situation, what Clarence Thomas said is absolutely correct, that, will voters have confidence in our judiciary and our election processes if we're not able to actually listen to determine what actually happened or what did not happen?
Can you help me understand from a legal perspective how this case or election law could have no standing before the election and then be moot afterwards? What do those things mean? And then how do we ever do anything if that's the case?
I don't really know what it means, except for this. Obviously, if anyone is going to contest the matter and bring it to court, you'd have to have standing. That is, that you'd have to have the ability to bring your case rightfully before the court, you being the person that is impacted in some way, shape, form, or fashion is able to bring it. Now, in the event now, our court is now saying afterwards, well, you don't have standing to bring it afterwards. It really makes no sense. And what really is telling is that, they've essentially changed the election law in Pennsylvania. I can tell you, I've sat for many years in the elections court here in Philadelphia. And back in 2015, I was appointed as the elections commissioner overseeing in Philadelphia elections because of my integrity, my background experience. And I can tell you, not one justice on our Pennsylvania Supreme Court has ever served one day in the election court. That also is telling. So we need justices that actually have experience, that actually, are not afraid to stand up and do that which is right. So we need people of courage. And we also need people that understand the rule of law and that the law is really important to be applied as it relates to elections and any other matter. Our Constitution is very important. And if we have jurists that are not interested in applying our rule of law, I think that we're in a world of trouble going forward.
I never heard of election court. What is that? And how prevalent would you say election fraud is?
Well, we have election courts, and so in my jurisdiction in Philadelphia, judges do sit as elections judges, and what that means is that during the course of elections, there may be election fights or things that may happen where they may have to come to court to enter injunctions. Also, if someone is being challenged on the ballot, if the petitions or the signatures do not match, things like that are issues that actually happen in election court. So if somebody is running for a particular office and their challenge is heard by a judge in elections court, if there are issues on elections day, for example, if they're fighting at the polls, or if someone has created, let's say, a slate card and the slate card is not the official party slate card, then they would bring an injunction to stop. So a lot of things happen in election court centering around elections that election judges actually hear.
How prevalent is fraud? I know that's a big question, and I don't even know how to. What does fraud even look like? But how often does that happen?
I mean, I think as long as we've had elections, there has been some level of fraud, obviously. I mean, from, it comes, that's why we have the Voting Rights Act and things like that. So it's not uncommon for elections to involve fraud. I mean, I was just amazed that people were so shocked that fraud actually exists in elections. But, hey, I'm an elections judge. At different times I've sat elections in Philadelphia, and, it's prevalent. I mean, it happens. I think anytime where we have man that's able to exercise dominion and power and control in certain areas, there is some level of space for corruption. That's why we need, good judges, and especially good election judges.
Yeah, I'm almost less concerned about fraud now, as much as just a clear, articulate definition of the rules, right? Like at this point, we don't even what are the rules? Like people are just making them up as we go along. Like,
right.
What is? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's one of our concerns, that we shouldn't allow there to be, judges just making decisions based upon how they feel or what they think, because the law is clear as it relates to voting, as it relates to our elections. And in Pennsylvania alone, it was actually where there was a bipartisan effort to come together to create what is called Act 77, that, essentially allowed mail-in voting and things like that. And so, a lot of that can be traced or attributed to that. And so there are several things that I think were involved in terms of whether it's election fraud, election integrity, all those things. It goes back, I think, to our legislatures that caused these things to kind of happen before it even got to the courts.
I want people to support your campaign. Do you guys accept money? Is that a thing for judges running for election?
Of course we accept money. As a judge, I can't ask for money, but I can tell you that, of course, elections, are expensive. I can't ask for money. But if anyone's interested in contributing to anyone interested in donating or just volunteering, go to votepaulapatrick.com. That's my website, votepaulapatrick.com. You get more information about me as a candidate and my stance on views.
Okay, super. So I want people to do that, because we know how important Pennsylvania is going to be one of the most important swing states for a long time coming, and we need good people like you on the court to make sure that the law is followed. But we all live in different states too. So what questions should we be asking people who are running for judge in our states? What should we be looking for out of a judge? And I guess the other question is like, what's your judicial worldview that we think we need more of?
Well, my judicial philosophy is real simple, and that is that I believe that a judge ought to follow the law. I believe that our rule of law is paramount, and I believe that we need judges that are interested in standing up and defending our constitutions, our personal rights, and our freedoms. I also believe that judges should not legislate from the bench, and that is decide cases based upon how they feel or the way that they choose to think or the way that may be politically correct. A judge is bound and should always be held to the rule of law. And so when people are looking for judges, I think that they should look up a judge's track record. I mean, I myself, I've been a judge now 18 years on the Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia. I've decided more than 20,000 cases in my career. I've written more than 600 opinions to our 3 appellate courts. So I actually have a track record of ruling conservatively on all types of issues and standing firm on our constitutional rights. And so I think that if someone is interested in supporting a judge, they should be able to look at these things.
So last question for you, Judge. I'm grateful for your time. I obviously agree with you. But if I ask that to someone who's on the other side of the aisle or other worldview when it comes to being a judge, I doubt they would be like, oh, I believe I should legislate from the bench. And you know what I mean? They wouldn't like, so what's the other argument? Like, what's the alternative? Because I agree with you, but what's this other person say they do that makes it sound like the right thing to do?
Well, I've heard them say things like, we need a judge that's just compassionate, that will just rule from their heart, things like that they'll say, which really equals legislating from the bench.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when you say like, oh, we got to follow the law. It's like, well, yeah, like who...
Yeah. That's why we have judges, you know, and it's amazing that, you know, when you hear the other side, they talk about, oh, we have to be compassionate, we have to be this, we have to be that. Yes, okay, but you really must follow the law in understanding that, because justice is really what people are looking for. It doesn't matter whether you're liberal or conservative, black or white, Democrat or Republican. Everyone that comes to court expects a judge to follow the law. They expect the judge to do that which is just and proper. That's why they're in court. They don't look for a judge to rule based upon partisan politics. And unfortunately, you know, that has happened too often in our system, where our courts have become leaning left very heavily. And it's just not right. It's not appropriate. And we need judges that are not afraid to stand up and do that which is right, which is why I'm running.
I got one more question, like 30 seconds about all we have. How do you define justice? Because, you know, it's been perverted lately. It's been used to mean a whole lot of different things. Social justice, for instance. How do you, as a judge, define justice?
Doing that which is right by the law. There's a difference between being just and being fair. For example, you know, a person can be fair, but there's no justice. And so when it comes to justice, justice simply means that I'm looking at the rule of law. I'm looking and applying the facts and the evidence to the rule of law, and I'm making a decision based upon that and on nothing else. You know,
but not necessarily fair. What's the difference with fair then?
And so fair just simply means you get a piece of the pie, I get a piece of the pie. We're both equal. But that may not be just depending on the situation and the circumstances. And I think too often people misunderstand that fairness, you know, clearly is not justice. But one thing about being just is always right.
Good. Is it Vote Paula Patrick? Is that right?
VotePaulaPatrick.com. You can also find me on Twitter at Judge Patrick PA, and also on Facebook at Judge Paula Patrick.
Okay, let's support the judge. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Have a great day. That's going to be super important. I can't wait for a couple years from now to be reading a Supreme Court case out of Pennsylvania in the next election and have it be written by Judge Paula Patrick. Coming up next, we'll talk about men competing in women's sports, the latest, specifically out of South Dakota. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, we've talked a lot in this show about this idea of transgenderism and all the problems associated with it. One of the most obvious is boys competing in girls' sports. Like, what are we doing here? And a couple of different governors are passing some legislation well, some are banning it and some are allowing it. And Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, yesterday decided not to sign a bill that would prevent boys from competing in girls' sports. She was on Tucker's show last night, and Tucker got after her about it. John Schwepp is here. He's the policy director of the American Principles Project. John, how are you, brother?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm glad you're here. I have not been following the South Dakota bill, so tell me exactly what the South Dakota bill does.
Well, it's pretty simple, really. It's a ban on biological males competing in women's sports. And this is something that's been talked about in South Dakota for months. The legislature's been working on it. It passed the House in February. It passed out of the Senate in early March. And then Governor Noem came out and said she was very excited to sign the bill. And then there were 2 weeks that passed, and she kind of froze out all of the conservatives in the state, was talking exclusively to the Chamber of Commerce, to Amazon, to the NCAA, to all these moneyed interests. And ultimately, she decided to veto effectively. And it's kind of stunning. I think a lot of us don't really know why. And when she explained last night on Tucker, as you may have seen, I think a lot of us are still asking why. It's not really clear.
Wow, weird. So I want to get to Amazon in a second because that's weird. But the NC2A, are they taking the position that boys should be allowed to compete in girls' sports? Is that their stance?
Well, the funny thing is actually the NCAA doesn't have a statutory position on this. So there's actually states that have passed women's sports bills, Idaho being one that passed last year. And there haven't really been repercussions yet from the NCAA. Okay. So I think, there is the chance, and I think it's realistic. The left likes to take these states. We saw it in North Carolina in 2016 and make an example out of them and really go after them and kind of commit economic terrorism. And I'm sure the NCAA would have been part of that. But, ultimately, when it comes down to this, there's lots of states that are passing this legislation. We're up to, I think, 29 states have introduced women's sports legislation. Tennessee and Arkansas are preparing to sign legislation. And, Kristi Noem's on Tucker talking about how she wants to form a coalition. Well, it's already here. Join the party.
Oh, yeah.
We'd love to have South Dakota. And I think a lot of the legislators in South Dakota would be thrilled to see it passed. Unfortunately, she's listening to the wrong people.
You're so right, John. She said last night, well, my advisors and lawyers and whatever, they said we need to form a coalition of people against this or something. And you're so right. It's already there. What's Amazon's? Yeah, I don't even know what that even means. I don't even know what that goal would look like, but it's already here. What's Amazon's role in this?
Well, Amazon has a fulfillment center that they're building in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It would create 1,000 jobs. It's coming online sometime next year. And so as we've seen, this isn't just Amazon, but a lot of these companies do it. When they bring economic activity to these smaller states, they like to have a role in the policies that are passed through the legislature. And so, the Amazon stuff, it's been mostly rumor. I haven't seen it confirmed, but it's thought that they've been influencing the process there and pushing hard against any legislation that they would deem to be anti-LGBT or anything like that.
Wow, if that's true, that I think is the biggest story of it all. That Amazon, the Goliath behemoth that they are, can come in and sway a state's on something that has nothing to do with them. Like I understand Amazon coming in and arguing for a higher minimum wage to knock out competitors so that they can become even bigger. That makes sense. It's wrong, but it makes sense. But transgender, what is Amazon even doing here? That's a social effort that's I think the big story if that's true. What's the argument against these bills? So what's the argument that people are making that boys should be allowed to compete in girl sports? Because it's never the other way around, right? There's no girl. Well, maybe there are, but girls competing in boys sports, right? But why should boys be allowed to compete in girl sports?
Well, I think the argument from the left on this is that there should be fairness for transgender athletes too. And I do want to point out that these bills don't prevent transgender athletes from competing in sports. They would just compete in the boys division because obviously a biological male has inherent advantages, physical advantages over women, and we've seen that across the country in these competitions that transgender males have competed in. But ultimately, they're saying that this is about transgender rights, and that any effort to preserve a private space or an athletic competition for girls is discriminatory in its nature. And, we disagree with that. I think we recognize that we've had, we have two distinct biological sexes. We're different, and that's okay. And when it comes to competition, just because women might not be, as strong or physically, fast or whatever as men, doesn't mean that they shouldn't have the right to have this competition. Senator Tom Cotton brought this up on the Senate floor the other night. But, we're talking about Jackie Joyner-Kersee, one of the greatest runners of all time. I mean, just an incredible athlete. And last year, 75 or 80 high school males beat her records in the United States, right? Like, there's just a difference. And that doesn't take anything away from Jackie Joyner-Kersee. She's one of the most incredible athletes of all time. But, there are differences, and we need to recognize that, and our statutes need to recognize that.
Yeah. It's weird that, like, the argument is, well, let's just get rid of girls' sports entirely. We'll just have men and women compete against each other. And there's always this weird thing that we play every once in a while. It comes up where, like, John McEnroe, a couple years ago, was asked out of nowhere where Serena Williams would rank if she were playing in the men's circuit. And he's like, I don't know, like 700. And everyone freaked out, like, oh, how could you say that, blah, blah, blah. And then finally they asked Serena, and she's like, oh, yeah, probably. Like, I'd get crushed. So we like to pretend for some reason that girls can compete against men in sports, and it's absolutely absurd, as you mentioned with the Jackie Joyner-Kersee.
Yeah, well, I don't think it takes anything away to have elite women's sports and elite men's sports. You can recognize that they're different games, that they're different, activities, but it doesn't, female athletes who excel in that setting are elite. They're great. We don't have to have them competing against men in a fake contest to see that. So I just think it's kind of sad. It's kind of like feminism taken to this insane extreme to the point where most feminists are against this. And
it ruins women's sports. What a bizarre thing to do. Jim Schwepp, man, great to talk to you. Policy Director at American Principles Project. And I'm new to the American Principles Project, so I look forward to talking to you guys more.
Would love to. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, the American Principles Project, all about the family and supporting the family and strengthening the family. All right, everyone, have a superb day. We'll do it again tomorrow. Spread the word.